Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy, understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this February 18, 2014 edition of Nightcast. The top story tonight, friends, the Ukraine crisis. Police move into Independence Square.
The deadly situation continues. Just about 50 meters down the road here is Independence Square. I can hear the stun grenades exploding. The fighting continues on one end of the square. It's not clear what the police are going to ultimately do, but they are moving into the square slowly. Of course, we have seen fatalities today and running battles between the anti-government protesters and the police. The worst violence so far, if only that it broke out in a number of places around the parliament. Before now, it has been concentrated in one area. Now we see the violence spreading in Kiev, and the question is whether the violence will spread even further, maybe in Kiev and possibly into the countryside outside of the capital and to the regions that are loyal to President Viktor Yanukovych.
Friends, from the time this video was taken about 2 hours ago, we've had an update to just about an hour ago, and it's become deadly on both sides. At least 13 people, including 6 police officers, have been killed in those violent clashes in Ukraine. Tonight, just a little while ago, after the first video from 2 hours ago, it's become what the journalists are calling apocalyptic, as police moved in on the main protest camp in the capital, Kiev. Bridget Kendall has this report.
The apocalyptic scene in central Kiev tonight. A firewall of blazing tents and smoking tires as protesters defiantly lob firecrackers and other missiles. Confronting them, a barrage of riot police using water cannon trucks to push their way forward. This protester, Lyudmila, says she's not afraid. I've been standing here 3 months already, she says. I'm here for Ukraine and for my family. Earlier, from inside the protest camp, the opposition leader Vitaly Klitschko urged his supporters to stay put. Each of you here should stay strong in spirit, he said, because we're not going anywhere. A new and deadly phase in the fight for Ukraine's future, which had earlier turned the centre of the city into a virtual war zone. Protesters lobbying rocks and Molotov cocktails. The police retaliating with rubber bullets, stun grenades, and reportedly live ammunition. The clashes lasted for hours and led to deaths on both sides, as well as hundreds of people injured. Here, a wounded demonstrator being helped by colleagues. Here, a policeman being hurried to safety. The worst day of violence since protests erupted 12 weeks ago, after President Yanukovych rejected a far-reaching trade deal with the EU in favour of closer ties with Russia. At the heart of the protests in Ukraine are two opposing visions of the country's future. Some people, especially older Russian speakers in the industrial East, want to stay close to Russia, their historic ally. But others, younger and Western Ukrainians, want to break free of Russia's influence and turn westwards towards Europe. Divided loyalties, which some fear could end up splitting the country down the middle. Yesterday, it looked as though tensions were subsiding. There were signs of a clean-up as protesters agreed to vacate some government buildings in return for an amnesty against prosecution. It's still not clear who or what ignited the trouble today, possibly radical protesters, but some fear government provocateurs providing the pretext for a crackdown. The American and European governments say they're deeply worried.
We are appalled by the violence that was already taking place in downtown Kiev and reports of armed riot police massing on the edge of Maidan. We continue to condemn street violence and excessive use of force by either side. force will not resolve the crisis.
Tonight, there are reports that the opposition leader, Mr. Klitschko, is meeting President Yanukovych. But it's still unclear if negotiations can calm this night of crisis. Bridget Kendall, BBC News.
Thank you, Bridget. Same last name as our opening and closing announcer, Barry Kendall. Friends, I have another story related to this. Bangkok, same type of thing is happening with protesters and police and protesters both being killed, both sides, and a lot of injuries. These kind of things are escalating. But before we go to that story in that protest in Bangkok, I want to switch to a story, and I want to tell you about a story we're going to have at the end of the program tonight. Friends, this is one night I almost didn't make it on. I was leaving myself open in case I needed to be available somewhere else tonight, and I had a slide ready to go to say, please check out something in the archive you haven't seen yet, because I wouldn't be available for the program tonight. But I'm here, and we grabbed, wow, there's the stuff going on today in the news, escalating. As you can see, this stuff is escalating. And Washington has its spokesman, Jay Carney, speaking about it, and it's like, hey, the great United States can't even get in there and do anything about this, especially Ukraine, the situation where that greatly affects what will be happening, the way the EU shapes, and the way the EU continues to grow in authority. Because when events like this happen, it causes the EU to muster up in political union, and the EU would like to have Ukraine as part of it. Russia would like to have it continue as their part. And as you heard in the story, it could split the Ukraine down the middle. That means just outright civil war, and it's turned deadly. Police being killed and protesters being killed, and that creates blood hatred that can only escalate. And I'll have more to say about the potential and about how that relates to the kingdom of God when we play the Bangkok story. But I want to play a story about the California drought that's in today's news next. That incredible story. And for the first time, we're talking about the water becoming, the lack of water becoming a record drought. Not just the worst in 50 years or over half a century since 1956. Now it's blown that. It's escalated to the point where it's drought greater than any on record. But I want to let you know, friends, don't tune away, because if some of this bad news say, I can't take any more of this bad news, I have a light, lively, uplifting story at the end of tonight's program, friends, that I think you should definitely stick around and see. It shows just how much there is an element of people from a certain family in the United States who stick together, and they're known as the Italian people. And some of the Italian people who come from Sicily actually come from a tribe of Israel, from the Benjamite tribe, which is very interesting. I've been learning about it, and I'd like to learn more about that. That's extremely interesting to me. But this story you're going to see at the end of tonight's program about how the Italian people stick together, you better not get in and try to interrupt relations in an Italian family. You could be in trouble. I actually, today, perhaps even made a little stumbling. Sometimes, friends, we can make mistakes, and we can pile mistakes on top of mistakes. And we really have to. That's a time when the good word tells us, Proverbs tells us, sometimes you got to just seal the lips till you can get it together correctly. And fasting helps. That helps a lot. You appeal to God. He shows you what you need to do. But let's go to this next story, because this one has tremendous impact upon what we're going to see happen agriculturally in the United States. And it's funny how there's a certain mix on this. With this California drought, some farmers are using the water that's available to them, not available to certain others, but available to them. They just happen to be in the right place at the wrong time or the right moment or whatever. Some of these farmers are using their water to grow hay for export to China, but they're talking about a good reason. They're reasoning why this is good for the United States based on the balance of trade and that kind of thing. Here's the story on that.
These dry times, this drought has got a far-reaching impact. It may go well beyond California.
Yeah.
I mean, we've never seen anything like this before. We just don't know.
Yeah.
Normally, we'd have green grass enough to sustain all these cattle and more. You'd have green grass here on the hillsides, you know, anywhere from 4 to 8 inches tall, and we wouldn't be feeding hay. If it doesn't rain, it's not. We know this. It's not going to be good. We sold over 100 head of cows, so we sold roughly 20% of our cow herd. We keep waiting and hoping that we're going to get a rain and we won't have to sell any more. But we have some earmarked to go to town if that has to happen.
And there's more than just a lack of rainfall to make John angry. Not everywhere in California is this dry. This is the Imperial Valley, where the All-American Canal turns desert into Eden.
Long-term solution is let the capitalistic system figure out the balance of water. And the water, they used to say water used to only run downhill. Well, that's not the case. Water runs uphill real easy with enough money pushing it. About a quarter of the valley is grown in alfalfa, and about 30% of the alfalfa grown in Imperial Valley is used for export markets.
The fastest growing market is China. The alfalfa hay is compressed into smaller bales, wrapped for transit, and loaded into containers. America's trade imbalance with China means many of these go back empty. Filling them with hay makes it cheaper to move alfalfa to Beijing than to John, a few hundred miles away in the Central Valley.
That's what we're doing. We're just virtually exporting our water.
You'd love to have the hay at a cheaper price up here.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we compete with the dairies in California. They set the price. We're always a little resentful of the dairy farmers. But that's nothing compared to the resentment we feel when hay is exported overseas, when it could stay right here at home and be utilized.
In my opinion, it's something that's part of the global economy. If we want cheap cars and cheap TVs from China, we have to do something to balance that trade imbalance. And it's our thought that alfalfa is just a small part that we can do in Imperial Valley agriculture, in the state of California agriculture, to try to manage that trade imbalance. If I didn't produce the alfalfa, if I didn't use the water would be going to another use. The cities use 70% of their water to irrigate their lawns, to irrigate the golf courses. So if you talk about inefficiencies, is it more efficient to use water for a golf course, for the movie stars, or is it more efficient for 120 farmers to use it to grow a crop and to export it and to create this mass economic engine that drives the country?
I think we need to think about what we're doing with our resources. I realize that the planet is almost all capitalistic. But we need to start thinking about, other things besides making a dollar.
Okay, friends, that special was produced by Dave King, filmed and edited by Luke Winsbury, and that was part of a BBC feature with Alistair Lighthead speaking to farmers growing alfalfa and a cattle rancher. Now, to the story that relates to the opening story tonight. Bangkok having protesters. Deaths as Thai police clash with protesters in Bangkok.
The following report contains some disturbing images.
Outside the Prime Minister's office in Bangkok, an uneasy lull. Here the police tried to negotiate. No deal. The protest movement would not give up the ground it's held here for more than 2 months. A short distance away, the police tried to push forward and faced fierce resistance. They briefly captured a protest leader. That brought rocks. They responded with tear gas. But still the crowd refused to retreat. It was hard to know who was shooting whom. This policeman survived a shot in the head. One of his colleagues died from a chest wound. The police tried to hold their ground, firing repeatedly with rubber bullets. Then this. A grenade arced into the police line. Landing at their feet, one officer realized the danger, but too late. 4 were injured. 1 lost his leg. More volleys of gunfire from the police, this time with live rounds, left many protesters with serious gunshot wounds, some of them fatal.
Well, this has now become a very tense front line. There's a lull at the moment, but what we just saw a few moments ago shows how easily violence can erupt when the tension's this bad. The police say they'll pull back, but the protesters are still very angry. The police do not want them to advance. There's still the potential for trouble here.
As the police withdrew, the protesters dragged up their barricades and reclaimed the street. It's been one of the bloodiest days of this long conflict, and in the end, little had changed. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Bangkok.
Friends, you know, in the world tomorrow, when people might be protesting against keeping the law of the kingdom, in other words, not keeping God's law, because God's law will be the law of the whole world. We won't have different laws in one country and another country. There might be local things that have to be dealt with a little different in one area because of the conditions there, whatever, but it'll still be one law around the world. We won't have situations where the United States is passing laws protecting perverts, like people who want to practice what they call gay. You know, that used to be a word that simply meant happy. But when people take a word that means happy and use it for a perversion, it's not the kind of fun that's going to still be fun tomorrow when people get sick with diseases and, oh yeah, they think their doctors have cures for anything. But these people, they're wrecking their bodies and they're being sold down misery lane with falsehood and lies, thinking, oh, doctors can cover you, you don't have to worry, they can cover these old diseases you get from such perverted acts. Not permanently, just temporarily. You're wrecking your body if you do that kind of perversion. And when the United States passes laws that favor these perverts, and then goes beyond that to the countries it was helping financially because of our blessings here, many blessings here, which God is removing little by little if you don't notice it, because of such perversions. But when we use what we still have, even though we're greatly in debt, we give money still to other countries, try to buy them off, like Uganda that wants to pass laws against perverted acts, homosexual and lesbian type acts that they call gay. You know, too bad they ruined that word. That was a great word, meaning happy. Just meant happy before, not sexually perverted happy, but just meant genuinely happy. They've wrecked that word. Perverts have, by adopting that good word. But when this country, the United States, tries to pervert another country, woo, if you don't think God is upset with that, you just watch what's happening now. Watch as it gets worse. But before we go to that good story I have tonight, to end on a nice positive upswing note, friends, where they talk about the goodness in the Italian families, and I'll say more about that in a moment. In fact, you know, I'll say a little bit more now. Friends, any families, we should not people should not do anything to upset the good relations that are going between and in any family. And that's a horrible, despicable thing to do. And people sometimes do it unwittingly, especially when others are emotionally involved, and then they get a wedge put between them and those people when they were trying to help them do good. Maybe they emotionally got sucked up, went a little far, but that should have been forgiven. Other people who thought they were doing good, they mean well, but they get in there and they cause a wedge. But in spite of situations like that happen, we hope God can help everybody cool their heels and relax and work things back out, and let those who have been involved in a good way stay involved, but and let peace resume. But I want to show you this film after this next one we have, the big about how those Italian families, they stick together in a nice way. But in this next story, it's been big in the news a few days. Time we give it to you, because now 2 miners have died at an abandoned mine in South Africa as they were prospecting illegally, but prospecting for gold. The body of one of them has now been recovered, and efforts are being made to recover the second. Namza Masiko has a very good report from Africa on this.
We've just spoken to illegal miners here who tell us that 2 of their colleagues have died underground, and the miners themselves retrieved 1 body. It came out through that hole over there. It is estimated to be about 1 meter wide, but they tell us that the other man's body is actually, if you go through that hole over there, you would have to walk underground, in fact crawl underground for at least 900 meters until you get to the other body. And rescuers are telling us that it would be very difficult and dangerous to try and retrieve that body, and that is why they also did not help the miners when they retrieved the body of another miner his body has just been taken out from underground, and it has now been covered with blankets over here and leaves, and they're waiting for the mortuary van to come and collect this body. So it's still unknown at this stage exactly how long it would take to retrieve the other body, or if at all, because rescuers are telling us that it is very dangerous underground, and there are rock falls that are happening down there, and it's very difficult for them to even say how long it would take to try and get the other body. Nomsa Masego, BBC News, Johannesburg.
Okay, thank you for that report. You know, the miners, they're in there illegally, but one thing that made some of them stay in there until they died, some of them, was that when they were coming out of the hole, they were being arrested. And, you know, they could have maybe held, I don't know, friends, you know, we need God's kingdom here. We really need it. We really need it. We really need it. I've got a good story we're going to end on tonight. The changing faith. This is from Altered. I'll tell you in a moment what this special feature is called, but it shows the changing face of New York's real Little Italy. While, let me give you a little lead in on this. This is a great story. While tourists in New York may get a tiny taste of Italian-American life by visiting the official Little Italy in Manhattan, for the full feast, they must visit a neighborhood in the Bronx. For generations, Arthur Avenue has been home to thousands of immigrants who crossed the Atlantic but never forgot their homeland. The sounds and smells in the traditional butchers, bakers, and pasta makers are all reminiscent of the old country. But there's also a new wave of Italian immigrants in New York coming to America in search of a better life. The new arrivals tend to be fluent in English and better educated. However, unlike their predecessors, fewer immigrate with whole families and chose to settle in the same communities as other Italians. The special feature is produced by the BBC's Anna Rasanen.
The name, the real Little Italy of New York. Most of the business you see are Italians. You know, you'll go to Tire Brothers, they're Jewish, and they speak better Italian than some of the Italians do. And whenever you walk in, my mom walks in and goes, "Hey, signore, che sta facendo?" You know? When they go shopping for Christmas, they go to the bread store, they go to the pastry shop, they go to the butcher's. By the time they do all their shopping, the holidays are over. Now the families know each other from Italy. Giovanna's family.
It's the closest you can get to Italy in New York. All the food and drinks, a lot of the old people that are around here are from Italy. You get the feeling like it's very close to home.
All right, I'm gonna get that noodle cutter and bring it over here. This got to be close to 90, 100 years old. When my grandparents opened the store in 1935, they were using this to help cut noodles. Grandfather Lindo, my grandmother Maria, they were actually teenagers when they left Emilia Romagna, Italy, but yet as little as they had a lot because they had each other. You know, something I think we need today. You know, of the importance of like family and support and love for one another. You know.
I heard in the 1950s there was over 50,000 Italian families in this area, and within 50 years there was a big change. Slowly, after so many years, Italians moved out. Other nationalities came in: Albanians, Spanish, Mexican.
There's no more Little Italies in New York, real Little Italies. In the past, entire families would move and they would take over buildings over buildings. To this day, modern immigration has to do with personal, professional development. 30% of my friends left Italy and never came back. Today, we Italians are trying to go to the United States because of the secret hope that you would realize your American dream.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that little special feature there from Altered States, which is a series of video features published every Wednesday on the BBC News. I actually went to our archives, pulled that back from January 8. Wanted to show that tonight. And friends, if you ever marry into an Italian family, you definitely want to include as part of your honeymoon going to this little Italy in New York. And you heard the music in the background. Sounded, with the ukuleles, it sounded somewhat Hawaiian to me. You got to include Hawaiian on your honeymoon. And maybe you want to go check out Sicily and Italy too and see where the Benjamite tribes originated. Wouldn't that be nice little honeymoon slicing there, hopping around the world in those little strategic parts. Friends, thank you for joining me tonight. We're out of time, so I'll just say, God willing, and that creek don't rise or freeze over or snow over, whatever. We'll be back again Wednesday night with our next edition of the current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy. And I hope you'll all work to build good relations with your family. Be willing to forgive one another, especially with, for some of us who watch this program, with what's coming up in just a few weeks on April 13 evening, the Passover. Be very, very willing to be forgiving and understanding, and allow people to retrench their ground and where they need to tuck it back and behave themselves a little better. All right, friends, that's all I'm going to say tonight. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.